Eleanor lived a life woven with threads of endless devotion. From the tender age of 16, her days were a constant ballet of caring, nurturing, and supporting. It wasn't a burden she carried, but rather a purpose she embraced with a gentle heart. Her younger sister, Susan, needed help after a difficult illness, and Eleanor, without a second thought, stepped in, cooking meals, helping with homework, and even brushing Susan's long, tangled hair. The laughter they shared over silly stories during bath time echoed sweetly in Eleanor's memories. Later, when she met Arthur, a man with a booming laugh and kind eyes, their life together quickly filled with the joyful chaos of children. First came Thomas, then Sarah, and finally, little Lily. Eleanor's world revolved around their needs, their dreams, and their scraped knees. She was the first one up in the morning, making sure breakfast was warm and lunches were packed with little notes of encouragement. She was the last one to bed, often after mending a ripped shirt or helping with a late-night school project. Her hands, though sometimes tired, never faltered. They were always ready to comfort, to guide, to create. She made sure every birthday was a grand affair, baking elaborate cakes shaped like castles or spaceships, depending on the child's current obsession. Christmas was a wonderland she carefully crafted, with handmade ornaments and stockings overflowing with thoughtful gifts. School plays saw her sewing costumes late into the night, her fingers pricked by needles but her spirit bright with anticipation. Parent-teacher conferences were attended with meticulous notes and questions, ensuring her children had every opportunity to shine. Even as her own energy sometimes waned, a quiet strength propelled her forward. There were days she felt like a worn-out old sweater, stretched thin from constant use. Yet the sight of her children's happy faces, the sound of their innocent chatter, or the warmth of Arthur's hand in hers was enough to recharge her spirit. She believed, deep in her core, that her greatest contribution to the world was the loving home she created, the strong family she nurtured. When her mother fell ill in her later years, Eleanor once again took on the role of primary caregiver. She balanced visits to her mother with managing her own bustling household, never complaining, always finding a way to make it work. She learned to give sponge baths with gentle hands, to administer medicine with a calm voice, and to simply be present, holding her mother's hand and sharing quiet moments. It was a cycle of giving that seemed endless, a testament to her boundless capacity for love and service. Her friends often marveled at her unwavering dedication. "Eleanor, how do you do it all?" they would ask, their voices tinged with admiration. Eleanor would simply smile, a soft, knowing smile, and say, "It's what we do for family, isn't it?" And for her, it truly was. It wasn't a sacrifice. It was simply her way of being. She found joy in their well-being, satisfaction in their successes, and comfort in their love. Her own desires, her own dreams, had long been tucked away, like cherished keepsakes in a forgotten drawer. Not because they weren't important, but because there always seemed to be someone else who needed her more. This was Eleanor, a woman whose entire existence had been a beautiful, selfless offering to those she held dear. The years, like gentle streams, flowed onward, carrying with them the vibrant energy that once filled Eleanor's home. Thomas, her eldest, found love and a career far away, sending postcards from bustling cities and calling with updates on his own growing family. Sarah, ever the free spirit, traveled the world, her adventures shared through excited video calls that sometimes seemed to flicker in and out of Eleanor's quiet kitchen. And Lily, her youngest, settled in a nearby town, but her days were packed with work and her own little ones, making visits precious but infrequent. Eleanor understood. This was the natural order of things, the beautiful unfolding of lives she had helped to shape. She had raised them to be independent, to chase their dreams, to build their own happy homes. She felt a deep pride in the wonderful adults they had become. Yet, as each child spread their wings and flew, a small, echoing quiet began to settle in the once boisterous house. Then, the greatest silence of all arrived. Arthur, her beloved Arthur, with his booming laugh and kind eyes, was gone. The illness had been swift, leaving Eleanor with a profound emptiness that no amount of pride or understanding could fill. The house felt vast now, its familiar rooms holding memories that both warmed and ached. His favorite armchair sat empty, his gardening boots remained by the back door, and the comforting sound of his whistling as he worked in the garage was no more. Eleanor found herself drifting through her days. The routine she had meticulously followed for decades had dissolved. There were no hungry mouths to feed, no school uniforms to press, no bedtime stories to read. The endless list of tasks that had once defined her existence had vanished, leaving behind an expanse of time that felt both limitless and terrifyingly blank. She would wake in the morning and stare at the ceiling, wondering what the day held. There was laundry, of course, and groceries to buy, but these tasks felt hollow without the purpose of caring for someone else. She'd put on the kettle for tea, but the clinking of the cup against the saucer was the only sound in the kitchen. Sometimes she'd sit at the dining table, tracing the patterns on the wood with her finger, remembering lively dinners, birthday celebrations, and tearful goodbyes. Her friends, still admiring and supportive, tried to draw her out. "Come to the bridge club, Eleanor," they'd suggest. "We're having lunch at the new cafe." She would go sometimes, smiling politely, but her mind often felt miles away. The conversations, while kind, seemed to float past her, not quite touching the new, undefined space within her. She was listening, but she wasn't truly shut there. A feeling of being adrift began to creep in. For 63 years, her identity had been so deeply intertwined with being a daughter, a sister, a wife, a mother, a caregiver. Now those roles, while still part of her history, were no longer the vibrant, demanding forces they once were. She looked in the mirror and saw a woman who had given so much, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, but also a woman who felt a little lost, like a ship without a compass. "What now?" she would whisper to the quiet rooms, the question hanging in the air, unanswered. The future, once a clear path paved with family needs, now stretched before her, wide and uncharted. She had always known who she was in relation to others, but now, for the very first time, she had to figure out who Eleanor was, just for herself, and the thought, while daunting, also held a tiny, flickering spark of something new. The quiet of the house often felt like a heavy blanket, muffling Eleanor's thoughts and leaving her yearning for something, though she wasn't sure what. One Tuesday morning, the sun streamed through her kitchen window, highlighting dust motes dancing in the air. She decided to walk to the local market, not for any particular item, but simply to feel the crisp air on her face and see other people. The market was a small hub of activity, with bright stalls of fresh vegetables and the cheerful chatter of shoppers. As she made her way past the bulletin board outside the community center, a splash of color caught her eye. It was a flyer, hand-drawn with bold, inviting letters. "Unleash your inner artist. Beginner's painting class, every Thursday evening." Below the words was a simple but charming sketch of a vibrant landscape, complete with rolling green hills and a bright blue sky. Eleanor paused, her gaze fixed on the flyer. A tiny flicker, like a forgotten ember, stirred within her. She had always loved art. Not in a grand, gallery-visiting way, but in a quiet, appreciative way. As a young girl, she would spend hours doodling in the margins of her school books, imagining fantastical creatures and beautiful gardens. She remembered the thrill of her first set of watercolors, the way the colors bloomed on the paper, creating unexpected patterns. But life, as it often does, had quickly filled those spaces where art might have blossomed. There was always a meal to prepare, a uniform to mend, a child to comfort. Her art supplies, if she even had any left, were probably buried in some forgotten box in the attic, gathering dust alongside old-school projects and outgrown baby clothes. The idea of sitting down with a paintbrush, of letting her mind wander through colors and shapes, seemed like a luxury she couldn't afford, a dream too distant to grasp. Yet, as she stood there, the market bustle fading into a distant hum, the image of that painted landscape pulled at something deep inside her. She thought of the countless times she'd admired a sunset, wishing she could capture its fiery beauty. She remembered sketching little caricatures to make her children laugh, or carefully choosing colors for a birthday card to make it extra special. Art had always been there, a quiet companion, waiting patiently in the wings. Now, with the children grown and Arthur gone, the excuses that had always kept her from pursuing this quiet passion no longer held the same weight. There was no urgent need, no pressing demand that required her immediate attention. The time was, surprisingly, her own. The thought felt both liberating and terrifying. Could she, Eleanor, who had always defined herself by her usefulness to others, now embark on something purely for herself? She reached out a hesitant hand, tracing the bold letters of the flyer. Beginner's painting class. That sounded right. She wouldn't be expected to be a master, just to learn. The thought of stepping into a room full of strangers, of picking up a paintbrush after so many years, made her stomach flutter. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time, a mix of fear and a fragile hope. The flyer seemed to glow in the afternoon sun, a small beacon in the wide, uncharted sea of her new life. It offered not just a class, but a promise, a chance to connect with a part of herself she had almost forgotten, a chance to fill the quiet with something vibrant and new. She carefully pulled the flyer from the board, folding it gently and tucking it into her purse. The simple act felt like a whisper of rebellion, a quiet decision to finally put herself first. The flyer remained tucked in Eleanor's purse for 2 whole days, a silent challenge. Each time her hand brushed against it, a nervous flutter started in her stomach. It felt silly, this fear. After all, she had faced sleepless nights with sick children, managed tight budgets, and navigated difficult decisions for her family with quiet strength. But those were responsibilities for others. This was for her, and that made it feel different, more daunting. What if I'm terrible? She thought, as she watered her houseplants, her mind still on the painting class. What if everyone else is much younger and more talented? What if I make a fool of myself? These worries, small yet sharp, pricked at her confidence. It had been so long since she had done something purely for herself, purely for fun, without a clear purpose or expected outcome. The idea of failing at something new, something she had secretly yearned for, was a quiet terror. On the 3rd day, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across her living room, Eleanor found herself staring at the phone. The community center's number was printed clearly on the flyer. Her finger hovered over the dial pad, hesitating. It would be so easy to put it off, to find another excuse. Maybe next session, she could tell herself, or perhaps a different class, something less exposed. But then, a memory surfaced. She recalled a time when Lily, as a little girl, was afraid to try out for the school play. "What if I forget my lines, Mommy?" Lily had whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Eleanor had held her close, saying, quote, "It's okay to be scared, sweet pea. But sometimes, the best things happen when we're a little bit brave." Lily had gone on to shine on stage, her tiny voice clear and strong. Eleanor realized she needed to take her own advice. Taking a deep breath, she picked up the phone. Her hand trembled slightly as she dialed the number. A cheerful voice answered on the 3rd ring. "Community Center. How can I help you?" "Hello," Eleanor began, her voice a little softer than usual. "I saw a flyer for the beginner's painting class. I was wondering if there were still spots available." The woman on the other end was very kind. She confirmed there were a few spots left, and patiently walked Eleanor through the registration process. Eleanor gave her name, her address, and felt a strange mix of relief and exhilaration as she provided her payment details. It was done. She was signed up. Hanging up the phone, Eleanor felt a wave wash over her. It wasn't just signing up for a class. It was signing up for a new chapter. It was a declaration to herself that she was worthy of pursuing her own interests, even if it felt scary. It was a tiny act of rebellion against the quiet loneliness that had crept into her life. She walked over to the calendar hanging in the kitchen and, with a blue pen, circled the first Thursday of the class. It looked like a small, bright beacon on the page. This wasn't a chore, or a duty, or a necessary task. This was an adventure, a step into the unknown. And while the fear still lingered, It was now accompanied by a growing sense of anticipation, a hopeful hum in her heart. Eleanor, at 63, was finally doing something just for herself, and that in itself was a monumental step. The first Thursday evening arrived, bringing with it a fresh wave of nerves. Eleanor dressed carefully, choosing a comfortable sweater and her softest trousers. She packed her new art supplies, a set of brushes, a small palette, and a tube of vibrant blue paint, into a canvas bag. The smell of the new materials was surprisingly invigorating. As she drove to the community center, her heart beat a little faster, a mix of apprehension and a tiny spark of excitement. When she walked into the art room, it was exactly as she had imagined, and yet wonderfully different. Easels stood ready, waiting for canvases. The air hummed with quiet chatter as people found their spots. There were indeed younger faces, but also others closer to her own age, their eyes holding a similar mix of curiosity and hope. A friendly woman with bright red glasses, who introduced herself as Martha, smiled warmly and gestured to an empty easel next to her. "First time?" Martha asked, her voice cheerful. Eleanor nodded shyly. "Yes, it's been a very long time since I've done anything like this." "Me too," Martha chuckled. "My kids finally pushed me out the door. Said I needed a hobby besides baking cookies." The instructor, a kind-faced man named Mr. Henderson, began with simple exercises, teaching them how to mix colors and make basic strokes. Eleanor found herself concentrating deeply, the world outside the classroom fading away. The smooth feel of the brush in her hand, the way the paint spread on the canvas. It was a sensation she hadn't realized she missed so much. As the weeks went by, something wonderful began to happen. Eleanor discovered a quiet joy in the act of creation. Her hands, so used to practical tasks, now moved with a new kind of grace, guided by an intuition she hadn't known she possessed. She started with simple landscapes, trying to capture the soft light of a morning sky or the deep green of the forest near her home. To her surprise, her paintings weren't just good. They were beautiful. Mr. Henderson often paused by her easel, offering words of encouragement and genuine praise. "Eleanor, you have a natural eye for color," he'd say, or, "Look at the way you've captured that light. It's truly lovely." His words were like warm sunshine on a long dormant seed. One evening, she painted a picture of a winding country lane, lined with trees just beginning to show their autumn colors. The reds and golds seemed to glow on the canvas. Martha, peering over her shoulder, gasped, "Eleanor, that's absolutely stunning. You really have a gift." Other classmates gathered around, murmuring their admiration. Eleanor felt a blush creep up her neck, but it was a blush of pure happiness. She hadn't just found a class. She had found a community. Martha became a true friend, and they would often share stories and laughter over coffee before or after class. They talked about their families, their lives, and their shared excitement for painting. Eleanor realized how much she had missed this easy camaraderie, this connection with people who understood her newfound passion. The quiet of her home no longer felt so heavy. Instead, she looked forward to her painting days, to the vibrant colors, to the gentle hum of creativity. She felt a lightness in her step, a renewed sparkle in her eyes. The question, "What now?" had begun to find an answer, not in words, but in brushstrokes and canvases filled with her own beautiful vision. Eleanor was not just taking a class. She was rediscovering herself, one joyful stroke at a time. She felt truly happy and excited, a feeling that had been a stranger for too long. The beginner's painting class quickly became the highlight of Eleanor's week. She looked forward to Thursdays with an eagerness she hadn't felt in years. The satisfaction of a well-blended color, the challenge of capturing a fleeting shadow, and the camaraderie with her fellow artists filled a space in her life she hadn't known was empty. Her instructor, Mr. Henderson, noticed her dedication and recommended she try an intermediate class, suggesting she explore different mediums like watercolors and pastels. "You have an intuitive touch, Eleanor," he said one evening, observing her work on a still life of fruit. "Don't limit yourself to just acrylics. I think you'd love the freedom of watercolor." Encouraged by his words and her own growing confidence, Eleanor signed up for a watercolor workshop on Saturdays. The delicate nature of watercolor, with its translucent layers and unpredictable flow, presented a new challenge, but one she eagerly embraced. She loved how the colors blended softly on the paper, creating ethereal landscapes and vibrant floral studies. Her home, once quiet, began to fill with her creations, leaning against walls, drying on tables, each piece a testament to her blossoming passion. Martha, her friend from the beginner class, was equally enthusiastic. "Eleanor, you're becoming a real artist," she exclaimed when she saw Eleanor's first successful watercolor. "You should join the local art club. They meet once a month, and it's a great way to meet other artists and even show your work." The idea of joining an art club, of displaying her paintings, initially made Eleanor nervous. It felt like a big leap from simply enjoying a class. But the thought of sharing her passion with others, of learning from more experienced artists, was too appealing to ignore. With Martha's gentle encouragement, Eleanor attended her first meeting of the Brushstrokes and Beyond Art Club. The club was a lively mix of people, some professional artists, others hobbyists like herself, all united by their love for art. They discussed techniques, shared tips on framing, and even organized small local exhibitions. Eleanor, usually a quiet observer, found herself drawn into conversations, asking questions, and even offering advice to newer members. She learned about different art history periods, discovered new artists, and felt a profound sense of belonging. The club's monthly challenge, where members painted on a specific theme, became a source of both fun and creative growth. One month, the theme was Hidden Beauty, and Eleanor chose to paint an old, gnarled tree in her garden, its weathered bark telling stories of resilience. The painting, with its rich textures and subtle colors, received many compliments at the next meeting. Eleanor's days, once marked by routine and quiet solitude, were now bursting with color and activity. She spent hours in her makeshift studio, a corner of her sunroom, experimenting with paints, sketching ideas in her notebook, and listening to classical music. She felt a lightness in her heart, a joyful hum that vibrated through her entire being. She wasn't just passing the time, she was actively creating, learning, and connecting. Her home, which had once felt empty, now felt alive with her new purpose. The canvases, both finished and in progress, added warmth and personality to every room. She was making art, beautiful art, and more importantly, she was having fun. This newfound passion wasn't just a hobby. It was a vibrant thread, weaving a new, colorful tapestry for the rest of her life. The change in Eleanor was not sudden, but like the slow, beautiful unfolding of a flower, her family began to notice. It started with the small things, a sparkle in her eye during video calls, a brighter tone to her voice when she spoke of her week, a new lightness in her laugh. When her children visited, they saw it in the vibrant paintings that now adorned the walls of her once somber home, each canvas telling a story of newfound joy. Thomas, her eldest, was the first to comment. During a Sunday phone call, Eleanor was describing a challenging watercolor technique she was learning. "Mom," he interrupted, a smile in his voice, "you sound so alive. It's wonderful to hear you so excited about something." Eleanor felt a warm flush spread through her. She realized she was excited, truly, deeply excited, about something that was entirely her own. Sarah, ever observant, noticed it during her next visit home. Eleanor was showing her a landscape she had just finished, a serene meadow bathed in morning light. Sarah traced the delicate brushstrokes with her finger. "This is beautiful, Mom," she said, her voice soft with admiration. "But more than that, you look beautiful. You have a glow about you, a happiness that I haven't seen in a long time." She pulled Eleanor into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you for finding this." Lily, who lived closest, was the recipient of Eleanor's art. Her daughter's house now featured a lovely painting of a bustling market scene, a gift from Eleanor. One afternoon, while having tea, Lily watched her mother sketch in a small notebook. "Mom," she said, "remember how you always told me to be brave and try new things, even when I was scared?" Eleanor nodded, smiling at the memory. "Well," Lily continued, "you're doing it. You're being brave, and it's inspiring to see you putting yourself first, doing something you truly love." Hearing these words from her children, Eleanor's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and relief. For so long, her joy had been tied to their happiness, their well-being. To hear them acknowledge her own happiness, and to express pride in her personal journey, was a profoundly moving experience. It affirmed that her decision to pursue art wasn't selfish, but a necessary step towards her own fulfillment. Her sister, Susan, also remarked on the change. "Eleanor, you always gave so much to us," Susan said during a video chat, looking at a painting of a lively garden that Eleanor had hung behind her. "It's your turn now. And look what beautiful things are happening." Eleanor realized that her family's pride wasn't just about her artistic talent, but about her courage. It was about her willingness to step out of the familiar comfort of her old roles and embrace a new identity, a new purpose. They saw not just a mother or a grandmother, but a woman who was actively creating a vibrant, joyful life for herself. This recognition from her loved ones deepened her contentment. It was a gentle, loving confirmation that she was on the right path. She no longer felt lost. Instead, she felt anchored by her passion and lifted by the support and love of her family. Their pride was a sweet melody, playing in harmony with the colorful symphony of her new beginning. She knew, with a certainty that warmed her to her core, that putting herself first had been the best decision she could have made. With her family's loving support echoing in her heart, Eleanor felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. She often reflected on the journey that had brought her to this vibrant new chapter. Just a year ago, she had been adrift, uncertain of her purpose, convinced that her days of discovery were long past. Now, at 63, her life was richer, fuller, and more colorful than she could have ever imagined. One crisp autumn morning, as she sat in her sunroom, sketching a cluster of bright red berries she'd found on a walk, a deep understanding bloomed within her. It was never too late. Never too late to pick up a forgotten dream. Never too late to try something entirely new. Never too late to find joy and passion that was purely for herself. The idea that life had an expiry date for personal growth was simply untrue. Her own experience was living proof. She thought of all the women she knew, perhaps a bit older, perhaps a bit younger, who might also be feeling that same quiet uncertainty she had once known. She felt a strong desire to share her story, not in a grand way, but in the quiet, encouraging conversations she now had with friends and new acquaintances. Eleanor's days were now a beautiful tapestry, woven with creative pursuits and meaningful connections. She still cherished her family, of course, and their calls and visits remained precious. But now, she also had her art classes, her art club meetings, and the quiet hours spent in her studio. She was planning a small exhibition with brushstrokes and beyond, a prospect that would have terrified her just months ago, but now filled her with eager anticipation. She even found herself venturing out more, exploring new places to find inspiration for her paintings. A trip to a local botanical garden yielded sketches of exotic flowers, while a visit to the coast sparked ideas for vibrant seascapes. Each outing was an adventure, each observation a potential masterpiece waiting to be brought to life on canvas. Her physical space mirrored her inner transformation. The house, once quiet and a little somber, now glowed with her art. Canvases in various stages of completion were everywhere. A half-finished portrait on an easel, a stack of watercolors drying on a table, a bold acrylic landscape hanging proudly in the living room. The colors brought life and warmth, reflecting the joy that now resided within Eleanor. Eleanor understood that this wasn't just about painting. It was about self-discovery, about honoring the woman she was and the woman she was still becoming. It was about realizing that a lifetime of caring for others had not diminished her, but had prepared her, imbuing her with the empathy and depth that now flowed into her art. As she put down her pencil, admiring the delicate lines of the berry sketch, Eleanor smiled. The journey had been unexpected, a detour she hadn't planned, but it had led her to a place of profound happiness. At 63, she wasn't winding down. She was just beginning. This was her new beginning, a vibrant, joyful testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to bloom, no matter the season.